Do you believe that some deaths are not the result of fate, but are designed as intricately as a technical blueprint? That morning, if I had only turned the key once, my entire body would have been shattered on the highway. But what my daughter-in-law never expected is that I am still alive to tell the whole truth. If you find this story worth exposing, please subscribe to the channel and tell me where you're watching from. Your support is the greatest motivation for me to continue. That morning, the spring sunlight poured through the garage window, shining on the silver sedan I had been driving for nearly 10 years. I wore a freshly pressed black suit and tightened my tie neatly in the rearview mirror. It was not an ordinary morning. I was preparing to drive from Evanston to Chicago to attend the reading of my son's will, Michael Harper. Just thinking of the word will weighed heavily on my heart. 3 weeks earlier, Michael, my only son, the one who had built a cybersecurity company worth tens of millions of dollars, died suddenly at the age of 42. His death was recorded by the doctor as cause unknown. For an engineer like me, that phrase was nothing but a dull knife, unconvincing, unclear, yet sharp enough to cut open the heart. I walked to the car and placed my hand on the handle. A slight tremor passed through me, but I thought it was only nerves about facing legal documents and lawyers. I took a deep breath, ready to pull the handle down. At that exact moment, a shout tore through the quiet morning. "David! Don't start the engine. Stop right now." I froze, hand stiff, heart pounding like war drums. Looking back, I saw Mr. Collins, the neighbor 2 houses down, a retired police officer, rushing out the gate, feet still in slippers, bathrobe flapping. His face was flushed, his eyes wide, a mix of fear and determination. That scene alone told me this was no joke. A battle-hardened man who had investigated countless bloody crime scenes would never scream like that over a vague hunch. I released the handle, standing motionless as if hypnotized. In that instant, my mind painted terrifying images. The sedan speeding on the highway, brakes failing, the body spinning, crashing into the barrier. They would find me in twisted metal, just another name added to a death list. Collins reached me, breathless, his trembling hand gripping my shoulder, his voice hoarse but firm. "Listen to me, David. Don't start the car. Something is very wrong." A man who had worn the uniform for 30 years, who had witnessed countless accidents, now trembling like this, it was enough to make me shiver. I asked faintly, my voice breaking, "What is it, Collins?" He swallowed, his eyes sharp. "Last night, I saw a figure that looked very much like Sophia, your daughter-in-law, hanging around your car, but they were hooded, so I couldn't be certain. And there was a strange man with her." The air in the garage suddenly thickened. Sophia, the daughter-in-law who had been wearing black and weeping for the past 3 weeks, like a grieving widow, suddenly became a suspect. Collins took a deep breath, continuing, "At about 11:45, I went to the bathroom, looked out the window, and saw 2 hooded figures, one of them shaped very much like Sophia. Open your car hood. They tinkered for 15 minutes. When they noticed my bedroom light, they panicked, slammed the hood shut, and ran. I heard my heart beating in my ears, each thump like a hammer striking my temples. Only one thought echoed. If Collins was right, Sophia had tried to kill me. Sophia would inherit nearly $55 million if I died. Just one simple traffic accident. On the way to Chicago, the police would record accidental death. No suspicion. And then, the entire fortune of Michael would fall neatly into the hands of the young widow. I stepped back, staring at the familiar sedan with new eyes. The body still shone, unscarred, but I knew danger sometimes hides inside, like a snake in the grass waiting to strike. My life had been tied to engineering, and I knew all it took was one cut in a brake line, one loosened bolt, and disaster would strike. And Sophia? She could not have thought of this herself. I shuddered. So who was the man with her? A mechanic? A criminal? Collins still gripped my shoulder, eyes anxious but steady. David, I've seen many accidents that looked random, but were in fact murder. If you had started the engine this morning, I might be delivering bad news to the police right now. I clenched the key in my hand. It was icy, but that coldness made me alert. I nodded, whispering, "You just saved my life, Collins." In the silent garage, only the sparrows outside could be heard, while my heart still thrashed, as if trying to escape my chest. I did not know what I would face that day. But one thing was clear. If it really was Sophia, she had crossed a line from which there was no return. And the man who had touched that car, he was the key to exposing the truth. After calming down, I invited Collins inside. We sat at the kitchen table, with the faint smell of morning coffee and sunlight streaming through the curtains. He was still catching his breath, but his eyes were resolute. I poured him a glass of water, my mind burning, questions pounding. Was Sophia truly involved? Who was that man? And most importantly, what had they done in those 15 minutes under the hood? Collins slowly explained. Since retirement, he had struggled with insomnia, often awake at midnight, standing by the window looking at the street. Last night, close to midnight, he saw an old blue truck parked a few houses away. The streetlight revealed two figures, both dressed in dark, hooded, one of them with a shape and hastily tied hair that reminded him of Sophia. The other looked bulky, wearing a worn leather jacket. They moved quickly toward my garage, sneaky like thieves. "I recognized it right away," Collins said, "the smell of people about to commit a crime." With 30 years as a cop, he was too familiar with the hunched walks and cautious gestures of criminals. The figure resembling Sophia stood watch, while the man crouched, working with a toolkit he carried. From his upstairs window, Collins could see the metallic glint under the streetlight. From time to time, the figure like Sophia glanced around, eyes flickering nervously. My back turned cold at the image. If it truly was Sophia, then the picture of a young widow, 3 weeks after her husband's death, sneaking into her father-in-law's garage at midnight with a strange man, it was terrifying. Everything she had shown others, the grieving wife, the dutiful daughter-in-law, collapsed in my mind. Collins added that when he switched on his bedroom light, the glow startled them. The woman signaled the man, slammed the hood, and they both ran toward the truck. The man took the driver's seat, and the woman jumped into the passenger seat. The truck sped off, leaving smoke and suspicion thicker than the night. I sat frozen, listening to every word. The scene Collins described left no room for coincidence. A normal woman would never sneak into her father-in-law's garage at midnight, and certainly not with a rough-looking man carrying professional tools. I tapped my fingers lightly on the wooden table, trying to control the fury boiling inside. If Collins had not witnessed it, if I had not been warned, I might have sat in that car this morning, driven onto the highway, and ended my life in a staged accident. "I have seen many murders disguised as accidents," Collins said, his voice lowering. "And most of the time, the person behind it is family. Outsiders rarely have such strong motives. Mr. David, I believe that shadow was your daughter-in-law, and the man with her, he was without doubt her accomplice." I gripped the glass of water, my hand trembling. Every cell in my body screamed, unforgivable. But alongside the rage, the engineer's logic in me began to calculate. If Sophia truly wanted to eliminate me, this plan could not have been conceived in a single night. It had to be prepared, calculated step by step. And that man, someone with enough knowledge to tamper with the car, was the key. I recalled the times I met Sophia after Michael's death. She wore black, tears streaming before everyone. But in her fleeting eyes there was something cold, calculating. At times I told myself it was only the prejudice of a strict father toward his daughter-in-law, but now everything fit perfectly into a dark picture. Collins looked at me, his voice firm. "You need to call a professional mechanic immediately. And better, photograph everything, record the evidence. If I'm not mistaken, this is a carefully staged plot. We need to prove it." I nodded, feeling a chill run down my spine. Before me was no longer an ordinary will reading, but a fight for survival. Michael was gone, but I was still here, and I would not let myself become the next victim. I clenched my fist, an inner voice echoing, "Sophia, if it truly is you, then you have gone too far, and from this moment I will begin to expose the whole truth." After Collins left, I stood silently in the garage for a long time. The silver sedan lay still under the dim light, suddenly turning into a silent accomplice in a murder plot. I looked at it, feeling as if I were staring at a gun cocked and ready, waiting for me to touch the trigger. I pulled out my phone and dialed the number of an old friend, Ethan Moore. We had known each other since working in the aircraft engine factory. Ethan later opened his own garage, becoming one of the rare ASE Master certified mechanics in Chicago. I believed if anyone could find irregular traces, it was Ethan. He answered immediately, his warm but cautious voice on the line. "David, you haven't called me this early in years." "What's going on?" I tried to keep calm. "Ethan, I need you right now. I suspect my car has been sabotaged. Very serious." On the other end, a brief silence. Then Ethan replied curtly, "Don't touch the car. I'll be there in 15 minutes. The waiting time stretched like a century. I paced around the sedan, studying every familiar line of metal. I recalled all the times I had changed its oil, replaced air filters myself, and was proud of its durability. But this morning, all that trust had turned into a deadly trap. I suddenly felt my own garage become alien, cold like a laboratory where death was being engineered. The heavy rumble of a diesel engine echoed outside. Ethan's small truck stopped at the gate. He entered carrying his heavy toolbox, moving decisively like a surgeon entering an operation. "Tell me everything," he said, opening his tools. I relayed Collins's account. Ethan's eyes darkened. "All right, let's begin." He set up a mobile lift, raising the front of the car. The beam of a high-powered flashlight swept along the undercarriage, illuminating every pipe, every joint. I stood nearby, heart pounding. Ethan whistled softly, then spoke in a low voice. "My friend, I don't like what I'm seeing." He pointed to a section of the brake line where a thin, sharp cut ran, as if made by an industrial blade. "This is not natural wear. It's been cut precisely. If you had driven another 10 miles, the brake fluid pressure would have dropped, and the pedal would have hit the floor with no resistance. On the highway, at 70 miles an hour, you would have had no chance." My throat tightened. The image of the car spinning out of control, crashing into the barrier, flooded my mind. I drew a deep breath, asked, "Are you sure, Ethan?" He nodded firmly. "I've worked for 20 years in this field." Natural wear leaves rough, jagged edges. This is smooth, like a knife through butter. Only specialized tools could do this. He moved on to the steering linkage. The bolts had been loosened with precision. "See this?" It hasn't come apart yet, but the more you drive, the looser it gets. When you hit a sharp curve, the system will fail. The car could roll over. This is no accident. It was set up to cause a crash after a certain distance, a design for murder. I gripped the workbench edge to keep from collapsing. The truth lay bare. I had escaped death by a hair's breadth, only because Collins happened to wake up. And if the figure Collins suspected really was Sophia, she could not have done this alone. I turned to Ethan, my voice hoarse. "Who could do this?" Ethan wiped sweat from his brow, answered, "A mechanic. Someone who knows the brake and steering systems well enough to cut and loosen without immediate detection. This isn't the work of an amateur. If Sophia is involved, she had help." His words struck like the final hammer blow. The pieces matched Collins's story. 2 figures under the streetlight. The strange man was the technical hand behind the plot, a true accomplice. Ethan took his phone, photographing each cut, each bolt. He carefully saved them, his voice steady. "This is evidence. You must call the police. If needed, I'll testify. No one can argue against this technical proof. I looked at him, gratitude welling up. But at the same time, rage surged within me. Michael was gone, and now I was targeted. Even if it was still a suspicion, all signs pointed to Sophia, and if a mechanical accomplice was behind it, I had to bring both into the light. I stepped back, staring at the sedan suspended on the lift. Underneath, those cold cuts looked like bleeding wounds. In that moment, I swore to myself, Michael, my son, I will not let your death fade away. I will expose everything, and they will pay. The sedan hung in the garage, a living witness to attempted murder. I thanked Ethan, asked him to keep all the photographs, and promised to discuss further later. But there was no time to hesitate. Today was Michael's will reading, and I had to be there. I could not let those who had plotted think I had fallen into their trap. I called a taxi. As the door closed, I sat silently in the back seat, the smell of old leather mingling with faint peppermint from an air freshener. The driver glanced at me through the rearview mirror, then looked away, asking nothing. Good. I needed silence to think. The familiar streets of Evanston slid past the window. The green maple trees, the peaceful red brick houses. All the same, yet in my eyes everything had changed. Knowing that here, in this quiet neighborhood, someone had plotted to kill me, I felt the world around me turn into a stage, and I was the main character trapped in an invisible snare. I pulled out my phone. In the photo folder were still the medical records of Michael. I opened them, eyes fixed on each line of the doctor's notes. March 12th. Patient presents with fatigue, abdominal pain. March 18th. Rapid weight loss, persistent nausea. April 2nd. Body severely weakened, unresponsive to treatment. And April 9th, the death certificate short and cold. Cause unknown. Just 3 weeks. From a healthy man still going to the gym each morning, eating with discipline, suddenly reduced to a corpse. I recalled Michael calling me, his voice weak but firm. Dad, if anything happens to me, watch out for Sophia. At that time, I brushed it off, thinking he was paranoid under the influence of painkillers. But now, riding the taxi into downtown Chicago, I finally understood. That warning was his last testament. My throat tightened. Michael's image appeared in my mind, eyes blazing whenever he talked about a cybersecurity project, a confident smile when he signed a new contract, and the exhausted look on the hospital bed. A man like that could not suddenly collapse in 3 weeks. So who shortened his life? Instinct told me that Colin's suspicions might be right, that Sophia was not only connected to the car, but could also be tied to Michael's death. And perhaps, like the sedan in the garage, Michael's death was also a deliberate design, a trap laid slowly with some poison that medicine could hardly detect until it was too late. The taxi sped over the bridge, crossing the Chicago River, the water glinting in the midday sun. Skyscrapers emerged, reflecting light like thousands of watching eyes. I suddenly felt like a lone warrior entering a battlefield where the opponent had prepared snares, waiting for me to stumble. But this time, I already knew. I gripped my phone, feeling my hand tremble not only with anger, but with determination. Michael was gone, but I was still alive, and I would do everything to bring the truth to light. Though there was no absolute proof yet, every detail in the medical record, every cut under the car, everything pointed in the same direction. The taxi turned onto the main road leading straight to the Loop, the financial center of Chicago. Towering glass buildings surrounded me, their reflections dazzling. I took a deep breath, sat up straight, imagining an invisible suit of armor on my body. In my head, a vow resounded. Michael, rest in peace. I will not let your death be forgotten, and those who killed you, who tried to kill me, will pay. The glass building of the law firm Mitchell and Reynolds rose tall in downtown Chicago, its windows reflecting the noon sun like thousands of eyes watching my every step. The taxi stopped. I paid, and stood still for a few seconds on the sidewalk, People hurried by in tidy suits and polished shoes, all rushing as if racing against time. But to me, everything outside was dim. I thought of only one face, Sophia. I stepped through the revolving door, air conditioning washing over me. The marble floor gleamed, the reception desk was high, and the leather chairs were neatly arranged. In the corner of the waiting area, under the light from the large window, Sophia sat. An expensive fashion magazine rested loosely on her lap, her hand flipping pages without looking, as if only to appear calm. But when her eyes met mine, everything shattered. Sophia's face paled, her lips parted as if to say something, but she swallowed it back. The magazine slid from her hand, thudding onto the floor, the sound echoing strangely in the quiet space. I looked straight into her eyes. That brief startle alone was enough for me to understand my safe arrival was outside someone's calculations. I walked slowly, each step echoing on the stone floor like drum beats. Sophia sprang up, trying to regain her usual pride. A smile was forced, but the corners of her mouth trembled. I didn't expect you to come." Her voice was thin as a thread, yet she tried to insert a hint of arrogance. I stopped, keeping just enough distance, my voice even. "Really? Interesting. And why did you think I wouldn't come?" I emphasized each word, my eyes never leaving the face that had lost its cosmetic mask. Sophia licked her lips, her gaze evasive. I just thought you might not be well enough to travel far today." Her words fell onto the cold floor like a dull blade. I did not answer immediately, only tilted my head to look more closely, letting the silence become pressure. Then I lowered my voice, tightening it slightly. "Interesting. Someone said my car was prowled around last night." Sophia's complexion shifted from pale to rigid. She blinked rapidly, then forced a smile. "What are you talking about?" I don't understand, but the hands gripping the chair's edge betrayed her. I needed no confession. Those trembling hands signaled she was not innocent. The air in the lobby grew heavy. A few young lawyers passed by, glanced, then quickly looked away. Sophia still tried to rebuild the mask of a stylish young widow, but the cracks were clear. I let the silence stretch a little longer, long enough for her to feel exposed before everyone's eyes. Finally, Sophia exhaled, straightened her back, and lifted her chin like someone holding the advantage. "Anyway, everything will be resolved soon. Michael left everything to me. You will get nothing, and I am ready to enjoy the life I deserve." She glanced out the window at the buildings by Lake Michigan, glittering. "See? I've already put a deposit on the penthouse there. In just a few hours, everything will be mine." Cold crept through me as I listened. Michael had not yet rested, yet his wife was already eager to buy a new home with the inheritance. Not a hint of sorrow, not a moment of remembrance, only ambition and calculation. I drew a long breath, kept my voice calm. "You should be careful, Sophia. Not everything goes the way you think." A flicker of unease crossed Sophia's eyes, but she masked it with a bitter smile. "You've always looked down on me, haven't you? Then just wait and see." At that moment, the frosted glass door etched "Conference Room A" opened slightly. The secretary stepped out, her voice polite. "Mrs. Harper, Mr. Harper, please come in. Mr. Reynolds is waiting." Sophia adjusted her dress, striding confidently as if entering a coronation. Her high heels clicked sharply on the floor, the sound like a countdown to a grand performance. The conference room of Mitchell and Reynolds was on the 47th floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows facing the deep blue Lake Michigan. Inside, light flooded the long mahogany table and glossy black leather chairs, every detail exuding solemnity and power. Attorney James Reynolds, with neatly groomed gray hair and gold-rimmed glasses, stood as we entered. He extended a hand, his voice low and measured. "My condolences, Mr. Harper and Mrs. Harper." I nodded while Sophia smiled confidently, as if today's meeting was merely a formality, confirming her as mistress of a vast fortune. We sat down, Sophia choosing the chair directly facing the window, the light striking her carefully made-up face, posing like a portrait of a winner. I quietly observed, letting her savor the last minutes of her illusion. James opened his briefcase, every motion slow and assured. He unfolded a thick file, his voice steady. The will of Mr. Michael Harper, dated March 25th, notarized and certified according to regulations. There are 3 witnesses, including his personal doctor. Sophia nodded, the corners of her mouth lifting slightly. In this document, James continued, Mr. Michael Harper clearly states his wish to ensure long-term care for his father, Mr. David Harper, and he also clearly states. The lawyer paused a beat, then spoke distinctly. The entire estate, including the company, real estate, and accounts valued at approximately $55 million, is transferred to Mr. David Harper. The room fell silent. I heard the wall clock ticking and Sophia's quickened breathing. Her eyes widened, her face blanched as if she had been slapped. What? Her voice was only a strangled whisper. James remained composed, drawing out a sealed envelope and handing it to me. Additionally, Mr. Michael left a handwritten letter to his father. My hand shook as I took it, the familiar handwriting clear before my eyes. Dad, I know Sophia is not sincere. If I do not make it, protect our family's assets and honor. I believe there will be schemes behind our backs. Do not give her the chance to manipulate. I trust you. My eyes blurred, but inside me a new fire flared. Michael, even knowing he was dying, still thought of protecting his father. He had seen through the ambition long before, and today, this will was the fatal blow for the betrayer. Sophia shot up, her chair crashing backward against the stone floor with a harsh bang. No! This is a forgery. I am the legal wife, by law. Everything belongs to me, she screamed, her shrill voice echoing through the elegant room. James remained calm, adjusting his glasses. Mrs. Harper, your husband had full authority to make a will and transfer his estate. This is a legal document with a no-contest clause. If you insist on challenging it, you will forfeit even the minimum share the law allows. Sophia turned pale, her lips trembling, but her eyes still blazed with fury. I will sue! I have lawyers! You will not take a single cent, David, she snapped, her voice dripping with hatred. I stared straight at her face, stripped of its power, now only desperation and spite. I answered, my tone like steel. Michael prepared for this day. You thought you controlled everything, but the truth is, you never held anything at all. In that moment, Sophia staggered, clutching the table to keep from collapsing. The entire room fell silent. Only the pounding of my heart remained, mixed with a cold satisfaction. All she had dreamed of, the penthouse by the lake, the lavish parties, the limitless credit card, dissolved into smoke with a single sentence. After the will reading, I thought it was over. Sophia shrieked and cursed, but the truth stood clear. The entire estate was mine. I walked out of the building with Michael's handwritten letter in my pocket, my heart heavy with grief for my son, but lighter, knowing deceit had finally been unmasked. But I had underestimated Sophia, gravely. Just 2 days later, her face appeared on the cover of a notorious Chicago tabloid. The headline blared in red, Greedy Father Steals Inheritance, Abandons Grandchild. Beneath was Sophia in a black dress, eyes red, clutching a framed photo of Michael. Behind her, they had deliberately placed a photo of me leaving the law office, looking cold and stern, as if I had just stolen everything from a grieving widow. And it wasn't just the press. On social media, swarms of fake accounts spread the same narrative. He's just a selfish old man, stealing money from his daughter-in-law and leaving his grandchild on the street. Greedy, no different than a heartless capitalist. The comments cut like knives. Neighbors began looking at me differently. Some whispered behind my back, others avoided my eyes. One even sneered as I picked up my newspaper. Mr. David, Aren't you ashamed to fight your young daughter-in-law for money? Worse, a few distant relatives, people who rarely spoke to me, suddenly called, reproaching me. One cousin even said, "You should share the inheritance with Sophia, at least for the child." People out there are saying, "You're cruel." I sat in my living room, reading every article, every comment, feeling as though the whole world was backing me into a corner. My heart tightened, not because of money or reputation, but because I knew Sophia was orchestrating all of it. She had hired a team of PR lawyers and media handlers, casting herself as the perfect victim, while painting me as the villain in the public's eyes. One afternoon, 2 police officers knocked on my door. They were polite, but their eyes probed. "We received a complaint from Mrs. Sophia Harper. She claims you have made threats and may pose a danger. We need your cooperation to answer some questions." I sat still, my heart pounding like a drum. Sophia wasn't only playing the media. She wanted to drag the law in, to shackle me, at least in public opinion. That night, I reopened Michael's letter. His messy but strong handwriting pulled me back from the abyss. "Don't trust her." "I trust you." I stared at every word, feeling Michael right beside me, reminding me not to fall. Sophia could buy newspapers, hire PR lawyers, and spread lies everywhere, but the truth remained. The cuts beneath the car, the abnormal medical records, Collins's testimony, all waiting to be woven together into a complete picture. I knew the battle had only begun, and the harder Sophia attacked, the closer she came to exposing herself. But if I lagged even a step, public opinion would bury me before the truth could speak. 3 days after the will reading, while the scandal still raged in the press, I received an unexpected call. It was Mr. Ramirez, the neighbor across the street, a retired electronics engineer. His voice was urgent. "David, you should come to my house right away. I have something you need to see." I walked over, weighed down with dread. Ramirez led me into his basement, where he had set up a self-made security system with wide-angle cameras aimed at the street. He opened his laptop, rewound to the night Collins had warned me. The screen was grainy, the streetlight dim, but it still showed 2 figures near midnight. One small, hair tied hastily, wearing a dark dress. The other taller, in a worn leather jacket, carrying a toolbox. Both moved quickly toward my garage. Ramirez pointed at the image, his voice steady. I enlarged it as much as I could, but faces aren't clear. They're both hooded, and the camera couldn't catch details. But see? That walk, that slight limp of the woman, I've seen it before. It's Sophia. I fell silent. On the screen, the smaller figure occasionally raised her head, the light revealing strands of tied-back hair. Too similar to ignore, but not enough to convict. Ramirez continued. "And the man, the way he carried the toolbox, the steady gait, that's no amateur. I worked my whole life in electronics. I can tell by looking. This is a technician, someone used to, tools." I nodded, my chest tightening with mixed emotions. The footage didn't show clear faces, but it reinforced Collins's account and Ethan's findings. A skilled mechanical hand was behind it, and Sophia, at the very least, had been there. Ramirez fast-forwarded. When Collins's bedroom light suddenly flicked on, both figures startled, hurriedly slammed the hood, and ran toward a blue truck, parked down the street. The camera captured a faint license plate, only the first 2 letters visible, IL-K9. My breath caught. This was the first direct lead to the accomplice. A license plate. Ramirez placed a hand on my shoulder. "I don't want to meddle in your family, but I've lived here all my life. I can't ignore what I saw. Keep this recording. You may need it." I clutched the USB containing the video, feeling as though I held a crucial piece of the puzzle. But I also knew Sophia wouldn't sit idle. She had built her media trap. Now she would surely try to erase the real evidence. Returning home, watching the long shadows stretch across the street, a chilling thought crystallized. This was no longer suspicion, but a war between evidence and lies. And from this moment, I had to stay one step ahead, or I would be buried by a twisted truth. That night, I sat in my study, the desk lamp glowing over a pile of papers and the USB Ramirez had given me. On the laptop screen, the frame froze on the two figures, running to the blue truck. The license plate blurred by glare, but the first two characters remained. IL-K9. I zoomed in on every frame, my eyes straining as if to pierce the screen. The final digits were unclear, but fortunately I still had friends in the police force. I dialed Lieutenant Karen Miles, an old colleague of Collins, now heading the Illinois Vehicle Registration Office. Karen answered, her voice firm yet familiar. "David, it's been a long time since you called." "What's going on?" I lowered my voice. "Karen, I need to look up a truck's license plate." "Illinois plate, starting with K9. I'm not sure of the full sequence, but there's camera footage. Can you help me?" On the other end, Karen was silent for a few seconds, then sighed softly. "You know I can't disclose things casually. But if you send the images, I'll review them in a personal capacity." Just this once, I hurriedly sent the clipped video. In less than an hour, Karen called back. "David, I couldn't find an exact match, but there's one plate that matches the beginning. ILK 9724. The owner is Kyle Henderson, 38 years old. He has a minor record for disorderly conduct. Currently lives in the suburbs of Cicero. Works as a mobile mechanic. Be careful. This type isn't simple. The name Kyle Henderson hit me like a hammer. A mechanic with a record living only a few miles away. Everything matched Ethan's assessment. I jotted down the address, a cold chill running down my back. The next day I drove to Cicero. The street where Kyle lived was bleak, lined with shabby garages, peeling paint and rusted steel doors. I stopped a ways from his place and watched. Out front sat a dusty blue truck. The plate was exactly the sequence Karen had given me. My heart pounded, my hands gripping the steering wheel tight. The garage door was ajar. I saw a burly man in a grease-stained t-shirt, bent over welding a metal frame. His stance was steady, his hands practiced, just like the blurry figure in the camera. No doubt, this was the man who had touched my sedan. I raised my phone and snapped a few quick shots. But as I was about to leave, Kyle looked up. His eyes swept the street and paused for a beat on my car. I sank low in the seat, heart racing. He stared for a long moment, then curled his lips into a cold smile. I left immediately, sweat soaking the back of my shirt. Kyle clearly wasn't easy to handle, and if he was truly connected to Sophia, then the two of them were more prepared than I had thought. That night, I called Collins and told him everything. He was silent for a long while, then said firmly, "David, you've got the key. But remember, don't act alone. We need more evidence. One misstep now and they can turn you into a trespasser, even a harasser." I sat still, clutching the photos I'd taken. Kyle Henderson, the mechanical hand in the shadows. I knew he was the piece that could flip the board, but I also knew, the closer I got to the truth, the deeper into danger I stepped. And it was possible both Collins and I were being watched. After a meeting at a cafe, Collins and I stayed to strategize. He tapped the table, his voice dropping. "Sophia's a fox. She won't confess. If we want evidence, we tail Kyle. Guys like him aren't loyal. Small-time thug into gambling. He'll run out of cash and come back to squeeze more. Then he'll talk." I nodded, understanding at once. Sophia might be cunning, but the mechanical accomplice was different. He had her over a barrel, so sooner or later, he'd become a burden. We just needed to wait for the right moment. Collins called a few trusted former colleagues. They agreed to help off the books. "We're not allowed to set a direct trap," he said, "but surveillance is legal." Over the next 7 days, Collins's team took turns tailing Kyle Henderson. He drifted in and out of third-rate bars in Cicero, or parked himself at slot machines in seedy suburbs. Every dollar he fed the machines drained his pockets, fast. The man was a hollow barrel, ready to sell out anyone for cash. On the 8th day, it happened. a team member reported. Kyle had arranged to meet Sophia at a small cafe in the West Loop. A quiet place, worn tables and chairs, only a handful of customers. Collins deployed a small trick. He had one of his guys pose as a courier, carrying a stack of fake files, and pass by their table just as the two sat down. In the moment of picking up dropped papers, the man would affix a tiny recorder beneath the table. That afternoon, Sophia arrived first. She stepped in wearing a fitted black dress, hair hastily pinned up, her manner tense. She chose a secluded corner table, fingers drumming on the wood. 5 minutes later, Kyle appeared. Wrinkled leather jacket, eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep. He dropped into the chair and pulled the water glass toward him. Right then, the courier passed by, the file stack falling to the floor. He bent down to gather the papers, apologizing profusely. In that crouch, the recorder was neatly secured under the table. Sophia and Kyle noticed nothing. The conversation that followed was captured in full. Kyle's voice was hoarse and bitter. "Listen, Sophia, I need money." $5,000. Right now. "Or I talk," Sophia snapped. "I've paid you enough. That night, you just did your part. Cut the brakes, loosen the bolts. I don't owe you another cent." Kyle let out a sour laugh. "You think it's that easy to walk away? I know exactly what we did in your father-in-law's garage. If I talk, we both go down. Difference is, I'm used to prison. You're not. If you don't want to be dragged into the mud, pay up. 5,000 is nothing to a widow about to have tens of millions." Sophia was silent for a few seconds, then whispered, "Are you threatening me?" Kyle leaned in, voice low. "Not a threat. A warning. I owe gambling sharks. They want to squeeze me this week. If I go under, I'll pull you with me. Your choice." The sound of Sophia grinding her teeth, then a wad of cash hitting the table. She exhaled, "Here. 5,000. But this is the last time." Kyle scooped the money and sneered, "Don't be stupid. There'll be a next time. I own your secret now, Sophia. Remember that." The recording ended with the scrape of chairs and Sophia's hurried footsteps leaving the cafe. That night, Collins played every word through speakers in my living room. Sophia's voice, Kyle's voice, they exposed the plot themselves. Collins's eyes lit up. "David, this is gold. With this audio plus the camera footage and Ethan's technical analysis, we can push the prosecutor to open a criminal case." Sophia just dug her own grave. I sat still, listening to Sophia's quivering words echo from the small speaker, a coldness spreading in my chest. No more suspicion, no more speculation. The truth was now etched into every syllable, every sound, and I knew the day of reckoning was near. That evening, when the audio ended, the room sank into a dense silence. I sat motionless, every nerve stretched to the point of snapping. Every word from Sophia, every derisive chuckle from Kyle, struck my chest like hammer blows. I had thought I was mentally prepared for every possibility, but when the truth rang clear from that little speaker, I realized how deeply it still hurt. Collins carefully stored the recorder in a signal-shielded pouch, his voice turning grave. "This is direct evidence. Sophia can't deny it now, but to secure a conviction, we need more. I want to thread it all together, one complete picture. When the prosecutor gets the file, they won't be able to ignore it." And so in the days that followed, Collins, Ethan, and I went all in. Ethan gave us a series of close-up photos from beneath the car. The razor clean cut on the brake line, the precisely loosened tie rod bolt. He also prepared a 10-page technical report, comparing it with known staged crashes he had investigated, concluding decisively, deliberate sabotage. Collins contacted a few former colleagues at the police department. One of them pulled street corner camera footage near my house. In the clip, at exactly 11:47 that night, an old blue truck stopped a few houses from my garage. Two figures got out. Both wore baseball caps pulled low and dark scarves around their necks, faces obscured, but the small-framed woman with faintly long hair showing beneath the cap. Everything matched. "We don't need faces. Collins said, eyes seasoned and sharp. "We just need to prove timing and context align. Add the audio, and a prosecutor will see the whole picture. We don't need absolute certainty. We need enough for a jury to believe Sophia participated." I sat in the living room, the wooden table spread with documents, Michael's medical records, the will copy, the handwritten letter, the undercarriage photos, the technical report, the street cam video, and now the audio recording. Each was a brick. Stacked together, they formed a solid wall, hemming in Sophia and Kyle. Sometimes I sat quietly, thinking of Michael. He used to run through this house holding a toy airplane I had built. His dreams, his steps toward adulthood, now buried by greed and betrayal. I gripped my son's handwritten letter and whispered, "Rest now." "I'll do the rest." Collins sat opposite, his gaze stern. "David, it's time to file with the DA's office. But I want one last step. We need to prepare a public reveal, not just for the court to see, but for society to see her true face. Sophia used the media to humiliate you. Now we'll return it tenfold." I looked at him and slowly nodded. For the first time in weeks, a clear feeling rose within me. Conviction. Not a fragile hope, but an iron belief that justice would stand with me. That night, as I looked at Chicago blazing outside the window, I knew a new chapter had opened, and in it, Sophia would no longer be the one pulling the strings of public opinion, but the defendant before the bench. 3 days after Collins submitted the entire file to the prosecutor's office, I received a thick-sealed envelope. Inside was an official summons, stating that I had to appear at the Cook County Court on May 28th as a key witness in the criminal case against Sophia Harper and Kyle Henderson. My hands trembled as I held that paper, for I had long been familiar with the silence of machines and cold technical drawings, but now my name stood squarely on a summons, not as an engineer, but as a witness in an attempted murder case. I took a deep breath and tried to stay calm. Collins put a hand on my shoulder and said firmly, "This is a turning point, David. From now on, it's no longer an underground battle. Sophia used public opinion to smear you and turn you into a greedy man who robbed his daughter-in-law. But justice does not only take place in the courtroom. Public opinion also needs to see her true face." And Ethan nodded, adding, "You are not alone. We will stand in court with you. The evidence is not only strong technically, but powerful enough to move the jury and the people out there." Collins went further, contacting a veteran investigative reporter at the Chicago Tribune who agreed to follow the trial from the beginning and was ready to write the story truthfully once the records were released. And Collins said, "Sophia wanted to turn you into a demon in the public eye, but then the media itself will be the mirror that exposes her mask." During the days waiting for the court to open, I lived in a strange state. By day, I carefully read every page of the file and rehearsed Q&A with Collins like a cross-examination drill. And by night, I sat by the window, looking at the city blazing beneath me, my heart both anxious and eager. One morning, when I went out to get the newspaper, I heard 2 neighbors whisper, "I heard the trial is coming. Maybe Mr. Harper isn't as greedy as the tabloids say." And I froze, then quietly turned away, realizing Collins was right. Public opinion was beginning to crack, and when the truth was publicly revealed, the name Sophia Harper would become an indelible stain. I folded the summons and put it in my breast pocket, my hand clenched tight, and remembered Michael's message in his letter, "Don't trust her, I trust you." And now the moment was near. This trial was not only justice for me, but justice for my son. On May 28th, under a sky heavy with gray clouds, I walked into the Cook County Courthouse, keeping Michael's letter in my pocket, every step feeling like it weighed dozens of pounds. Yet I knew today would be the day justice was named. Sophia arrived after me in a fitted black dress, hair neatly pinned, makeup flawless, smiling softly at the press and playing the unfortunate widow once more, while Kyle Henderson came alongside, closely escorted by police, still swaggering, his eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep. The courtroom was packed, and the prosecutor opened. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, today we will prove that Sophia Harper not only schemed to seize assets, but also conspired with Kyle Henderson to murder her father-in-law by sabotaging his vehicle. This was a deliberate plan to kill, and immediately Sophia's defense attorney stood. Objection! These charges rely entirely on circumstantial evidence. Faces are unclear on camera. The audio recording could be edited, and my client is merely a victim of extortion. And the judge nodded. Objection noted. But we will hear all the evidence. First came the surveillance video, the big screen showing two figures from an old truck approaching my garage at midnight, and the defense waved. You see, the faces are completely hidden. This could be anyone. You cannot pin this on Mrs. Harper. And the prosecutor smiled. Please wait for the next part. The second evidence was Ethan's technical report, and he testified in a clear voice, I have worked 20 years in this field. The cut on the brake line is extremely sharp, only possible with an industrial blade. The tie rod bolts were loosened just enough not to come apart immediately, but to fail after a few miles. This was not an accident. This was a design to kill. And the defense sprang up. Are you sure this is not natural wear? You are speculating. And Ethan held up enlarged photos. Wear creates jagged, rough edges. This is smooth like cutting butter. I swear before the court this was deliberate sabotage. Third came the financial records, the prosecutors showing bank statements, proving $10,000 were transferred from Sophia's account to Kyle's exactly 3 days before the car was sabotaged, along with ATM footage of Kyle withdrawing the entire amount, and the courtroom buzzed. Fourth was the audio recording, the sound filling the room. Sophia. That night, you just did your part. Cut the brakes, loosen the bolts. I don't owe you another cent. And Kyle. I hold your secret in my hand now, Sophia. And Sophia jumped up and shouted, That was a setup. I paid only because he threatened me. I'm a victim too. And Kyle sneered, Stop pretending you hired me. And the courtroom grew noisy. Sophia whipped around and screamed, You bastard! If you hadn't demanded more, I wouldn't have. The sentence trailing off, but enough for the jury to grasp the truth. Finally, the prosecutor presented Michael's handwritten letter, reading aloud, Dad, I know Sophia is not sincere. If I do not make it, please protect our family's assets and honor. Do not trust her. I trust you. And the room fell silent. The defense tried to salvage. This letter could be forged. Who can prove it is real? And the prosecutor concluded. The $10,000 in the statement was the initial payment withdrawn at an ATM on April 10th, and the $5,000 in the audio was supplemental hush money due to gambling debts. 2 times, 2 purposes, but both point to one single plot. And the prosecutor immediately called Michael's personal doctor, one of the 3 Will witnesses, who confirmed, This is indeed Michael's handwriting. I witnessed him write that letter. And the courtroom erupted. Sophia collapsed into her chair, face ashen, and Kyle raged, She put me up to it. She wanted the old man dead for the money. The jury took just over 1 hour to return, and the foreperson declared, We find the defendant, Sophia Harper, guilty of first-degree conspiracy to commit murder and vehicle sabotage, and the defendant, Kyle Henderson, guilty of accomplice to sabotage, extortion, and witness intimidation. And Judge Morrison struck the gavel, voice hard as steel. After considering the severity, the court sentences Sophia Harper to 25 years in prison with no parole before 20 years, and Kyle Henderson to 18 years in prison with no parole before 15 years. Court is adjourned, and Sophia wailed, her makeup smeared, no longer the stately widow, while Kyle, handcuffed, was dragged out, still cursing. Outside, reporters crowded and flashes exploded, and someone asked, Mr. Harper, do you have anything to say after all this? And I clenched Michael's letter and looked straight into the lens. Only one thing: the truth can be buried, but in the end, it always wins. And the cold wind from Lake Michigan swept across the courthouse steps, blowing away the gray clouds, and I knew that somewhere Michael was smiling. Justice had finally been named. Sophia paid for her greed. Kyle was punished for his betrayal. And as for me, I simply kept my promise to my son, to protect honor and truth. If you believe the truth always wins, leave a comment to share your thoughts, and do not forget to subscribe so you will not miss the next stories. Every bit of your support is the strength for me to continue telling the things many people want to hide.